Namaskar. The Bhagavad Gita is the ultimate guide to life's challenges. It helps us master the mind and live with clarity. Now you have the opportunity to experience its wisdom firsthand. Jayaji will be on a lecture tour of the United States from April to May 2025, sharing the timeless truths of Vedanta across cities. New Jersey, New York, April 5th and 6th; Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, April 7th to 9th; Atlanta, April 10th to 13th; Dallas, April 14th to 19th; Houston, April 20th to 22nd; the Bay Area, April 24th to 28th; New Jersey, New York, April 30th to May 4th. Want to organize a talk or attend in your city? WhatsApp us on +91 98202 32939. Let's take this powerful message to every corner of the USA. I now invite Jayaji for the penultimate class on Chapter 2.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Any questions?
So when we last time we were discussing that anger can never come unless there is any underlying desire. Any feeling, like is that feeling for other people, like jealousy or anger or love, is everything is attachment?
See, it's like this. When you have a lack of self-sufficiency, when you feel incomplete within yourself, then you need to reach out to others for sustenance, for completion. So it's like this, a creeper is incapable of standing by itself. So it has to find a tree and wind itself around it, tree or pole or whatever. Similarly, as long as you are not self-sufficient, you will hang on to something or the other, someone or the other. So it's like, what do you call it? Velcro. You know, if there's Velcro, whatever it touches, it gets stuck to it. The mind is like that. A mind that is not self-sufficient will get stuck to anything and everything it comes in contact with. So that is attachment. Now, then that thought flow becomes stronger and it becomes a desire to acquire and possess it. Now, when that desire is obstructed, it becomes anger. So your thought current towards the object, because there is an obstruction, it gets deflected towards whatever is obstructing it as anger. When the desire is fulfilled, there is fear of losing it. So then there are other things. Greed, if it's still fulfilled, there is greed. So kama, krodha, lobha, moha, delusion, mada, matsarya, envy and jealousy, arrogance. So all that you mentioned is an aberration of desire. Attachment is only the first stage of desire. When the thought flow starts coming, it's a thin flow of thoughts from you to the object is called attachment. So the first sign of attachment is when the person is there or the object is there, you are comfortable. When it's not there, you miss it or you miss the person. That's the first sign. So when you first start missing, then that the red flag should be recognized and dealt with. So the intellect should come in and say, is this an attachment that I should be entertaining? Is this something that is in line with my life's mission? If so, encourage it. Like attachment to the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, attachment to higher things must be encouraged. But if it's not, then you nip it in the bud. But our intellect is not alert and not available at that time because it feels all very nice. When the problems start, it's too late because there's a strong thought flow. So you see, during the day, you should observe how often is your mind operating by itself? How often is the intellect alert and awake and able to rein in the mind? Very few times. And the reason is because you don't feel the need to. It feels very nice in the beginning. Attachment feels good, desire feels good, especially when it's fulfilled, it's all hunky-dory. So you would say, why should I use the intellect? But when the problems come, then they come really, they hit you hard. Okay?
She's talking about one specific attachment, which is what I listened to.
One specific?
Attachment. But during my case, I was talking so many things. It becomes difficult at any given point in time scanning where is this okay. Unless you do some object, you don't feel you are attached to it. That's my, it's a drawback from my side, which is what I'm pointing out. How does one deal with that? Because unless you, the object goes, you're not sure whether you're attached or not. You feel yes, you're coming comfortable with the object itself, whether it's there or not there. But when the object goes, you feel you kind of attachment. How do they nip it in the bud at that point in time?
See, that's the thing. If your intellect is strong enough and is available, then you're able to detect it at an early stage. So you see, it's like a cancer. The earlier you detect it, the better it is for you. Now, if your intellect is not strong or not available, then what happens? You allow it to gather momentum and you become aware when it's a little too late. So you have to suffer. That's the thing. But at least in retrospect, if we learn and say that, okay, last time I got hit badly by this attachment, so let me be aware now, then you'll be fine. At least your existing intellect can be made available. Developing the intellect takes time. But in the meantime, if you fix a higher goal, if you find inspiration with something nobler, then you are able to manage. Because the interest in the lower itself wanes. You see, there are two things here. One is to make the intellect strong. The other is to shift the mind itself to something higher. Now the mind gets attached to whatever it comes in contact with. So right now what are you getting it attached to? A pet dog, pet cat, I don't know what, your car, silly things like this. But when you find something higher and you get attached to that, that is so much more fulfilling and so much more exciting that the mind itself doesn't go towards the lower. So then it is easier to control. So even with a weak intellect or not so strong intellect, you're able to control the mind going to lower avenues. But it is also true that you should not get attached even to the higher. But then you can face it when you come to it. Attachment, wherever it is, it causes sorrow. You're attached to the Bhagavad Gita, you're very keen that everyone should study, and you want more people to come. And people don't come, you're miserable. No, you don't have such problems, but I'm just saying. Right? So even the higher can cause problems. One minute.
Due to past ignorance, if I have created something that has caused a situation now, but now, for example, if I have created a job and I thought that this job will give me happiness, but now I understand that it doesn't. The source of happiness is not now, but I took the knowledge now. So now, when the situation is already created, how do I deal with it?
See, are you able to spot where the mistake is? What the question is that she gives an example that I created a job, meaning I took a job, thinking that there was happiness in the job. Now I understand that there is no happiness in the job. So what do I do? That's your question, right? Where is the flaw? Correct. Happiness is not in the job. You said, see now, I don't know, maybe I got you wrong. The way you presented it, it seemed as if I took this job and I thought there was happiness in it. Now there is no happiness in it. So what do I do? Take another job?
My question is that I desired something. Now it has come to me. But initially I desired it because I thought happiness is out there. But as I went along, I understood that happiness is not out there. But now that it has come to me, it does not fulfill me. So then how do I deal with the situation? I could have done well without asking for it.
It's the same thing. See, you're saying, how do I find fulfillment? What did you say?
Just deal with the situation. Like I could have done well without asking for it.
So you want to quit the job?
No. Whatever has come to me now, I could have done that without the situation coming to me. I created that situation because I thought it was.
Yes, you are suggesting that you move away from the situation because you are saying, I would have done well without it. Means you're saying, I'll quit my job. Right? But there is the problem. The problem is you believe even now that it is the job that is causing your unfulfillment. You get it? Which means, so it's like saying, I got married to this guy thinking he will give me happiness. Now he is not giving me happiness, so I'll quit this fellow and marry someone else. That's what you're suggesting. But the point is, happiness is not in the job, happiness is not in the husband. Where is happiness? Within. So why would you want to quit the job, or why would you want to divorce your husband or change any situation? You get it? So your misconception is still there. You've just changed the flavor of it slightly. This is where the mind tricks you. You understand what the problem is? You're saying, I thought this job would give me happiness. This job is not giving me happiness. I created it. I would have been happy without it. So I should quit the job. You haven't said it, but it is implied. So what I would say to that, or what the Bhagavad Gita says to that is, the job or the husband or your situation has nothing to do with your happiness. It is your mind. So your mind is projecting in various places. Huh? What will it project? Whatever you have. What do you have? Unfulfillment. This is not a personal thing, please. Your lack of happiness, let's put it that way. So your mind is like that. So wherever you project, wherever you look around in the world, that is what will show up. The initial romance is there, that will fade. In anything. See, that is why I gave an example of a guy in New York who, on one of my trips to the US, I came back to India and within 15 days, he sent me a message that my wife is boring, what should I do? Huh? He expected me to say, leave her and go find an exciting wife. But the answer to that is, the boredom lies in you, not in the wife, not in the husband, not in the job. It's your attitude that is wrong. You get it? So towards the same job, if you change your attitude, you will never change the job. You won't find the need to change the job. Unless something drastic happens. You get it? See, we get irritated over little things. Let's say in the job, or with the husband, with the wife, I want to do something, I have a desire to do something, and that is blocked. Let's say I can't afford it, or the boss says no to it, or the husband is not cooperating, or whatever the reason is. And a series of such incidents lead you to believe that, oh, the husband is bad, the job is bad, the situation is bad, the country I live in is bad. Like a guy in Delhi told me, I can't deal with this government in Delhi. So off he went. Lock, stock and barrel, he packed up and left. But it's not as if he's happy wherever he went. You see, the problems that are in this situation may not be there in another situation. But there will be some other problem. Why will that problem be? Because your mind is insufficient. And it never occurs to us that there is something wrong with my mind. So all your life, life after life, what do they say? 45 lakh janmas.
64 lakhs.
Huh?
That's your answer. 64 lakhs.
64. 64 lakh janmas, you will carry the same belief that it's the job, it's the husband, it's the wife, it's the world, it's the country. Because it's so deep rooted, it will not go. That's why it's coming out like in a question like this. This is characteristic, and I'm so glad it came out like this. Because you mask it and ask a question in another way. But you got to trace it back, and the root cause is still the same. What are you asking? My job is not fulfilling. I thought there was happiness there. There is no happiness in the job. What should I do? Quit my job and take another job. You'll keep doing it. You know, in the generation prior to mine, there were people who joined my father, for instance, and I know many others like that. They retired in their first job. Do you know any youngster who has done that? I mean, they haven't retired, but do you know any youngster who survived one job for more than 5 years? But you are not young. I'm talking about this generation. They keep shifting. Every 6 months, 9 months, attrition rates are soaring, causing a huge problem to not only them, but they are causing problems to others. That's the problem. Because that conviction is so deep rooted that the problem is out there. So if you trace back, why am I frustrated? Because this happened. Is there any guarantee that, the fact that you are irritated over something that happened or did not happen means there's something amiss in your mind, right? How do you carry the belief that your desires, the way you want things to pan out, your ambition or whatever it is, your plans must go through? And it cannot, if somebody says anything against it, you get irritated. So there's something wrong inside me, right? I have a wrong assessment of the world. I have a wrong assessment of my own thoughts and beliefs that I am right all the time. So every time you get irritated, every time you believe the problem is with you or you or you should quickly pull yourself back and think, is this true? And then embark on a positive program. That is the most important thing. Because unless you do that, you're always going to be frustrated. So this is the beginning of the month, right? January is not yet over. In this 1 year, you take it upon yourself to create the life that you want. You must be able to spell it out, actually write it on a piece of paper. What is the life I want in December 2025? Whatever it is, your financial condition, your health, your personal relationships, your career, your job, your personal development, home, etc. Everything. Write it down. Then, see, you have been thinking in a particular way all your life. Where has it got you? You're not fulfilled. So there must be a mindset change. What is that mindset change you want to bring about? Because that your mindset sets the tone for your life. It's in whatever you think, whatever you believe in, you act upon that. So the first thing is you must change to blaming others for your misfortune or unhappiness to taking responsibility for it. I am responsible for my life. I am responsible for the way I think, for my own happiness. Nobody else can do that except me. No one else can make me happy. Nobody else can make me unhappy. I am the one who's doing it. I create it. Then have a vision for yourself for the next 1 year. Whatever it is. A clear purpose, a larger picture. You see, when a plane takes off, Mumbai, around the airport, there are slums. But when you take off and go higher, what do you see? You see beauty. You don't see the filth, you don't see the slums. You see the sea, you see the sea link, you see Marine Drive at a particular height. You don't see slums, you don't see traffic. And this is it in life. The moment you raise your vision, you don't see the negatives. You see a beautiful picture out there. And you genuinely make effort to achieve it. Work hard to achieve it. And there is pleasure in the work. Doesn't matter if you fail. You know, Kobe Bryant, you've heard of him? The famous basketball player. He says, one whole summer means the entire summer, 3-4 months, he was playing every day. He did not score a single point. Not one. But he didn't give up. If we had been in his place, we would have given up long back. He said, no. Next week, next year will be better. Next month will be better. And so it was. He said, I'll just work that much harder. Because nothing is impossible. You work towards it, you work differently, you think differently, you can achieve it. Michael Jordan, same thing. He was first of all disqualified because he was not tall enough, he's too short. So he went crying to his mother. They haven't selected me because they think I'm too small for the game. And the mother told him something very interesting. He says, it is not the size of the player that matters. It is the size of the game in the player that matters. How big is the game in your mind? Go for it. What a way he played and what a way he excelled. You know? So that vision is so important. And never say die attitude. Fine, you meet with failures. Pull yourself together and keep going. And as you work and work hard, the fog lifts and you see a clear path to your goal. And that goal has nothing to do with other people. It's just you, within you. Then you have to design an environment for success. Because if you surround yourself with negative people, there are certain people, you meet them, within the first 2 minutes, they'll say, there's no hope for this country. You see, corruption is going up, taxation is going up. Now the finance minister is going to come up with a budget. Same thing. What will she do? She'll only increase taxes. What is the Prime Minister doing? I see, look what Trump is doing. He's anti-India. Stock market has gone down. Economy is going down. By the end of it, you will feel so low, you'll feel like going and shooting yourself. Instead, surround yourself with positive people. Even if it's one person. You know, I had an uncle who passed away recently at an age of 96 or something. The last 5 years of his life, he was completely, totally blind. He could not see. If you placed your hand in front of him, he couldn't see. What a wonderful person he was. Right from the time he went blind till the time he died, not once did he complain. He didn't complain. He had 3 daughters. Not one daughter took him in and looked after him. They left him alone in his house with a caretaker who took care of him. But he never complained. He never complained that I've gone blind. He always had a smile on his face. And every time I met him, I came back, I said, if that man can smile through his problems, what the hell am I pulling a long face for? I have no reason to complain. So, and learn, be in learning mode, learn new skills, learn a new language, learn, I don't know, there's so many things to learn. Learn a new recipe, something. Within your field, there's so much to learn. And enjoy the process. It is such fun. From the simplest thing to the most complex problems. Life is fun. If you're objective, if you have the right attitude, isn't it? So our takeaway for this week is just chill, just have fun. It's not worth taking life seriously. Even God doesn't take life seriously. What are you sitting there and pretending as if the world's problems are on your head? No? So, yes, sorry, you had a question.
How to tell the intellect that nobody should take nobody should take advantage of us.
How to tell your intellect that nobody should take advantage of you? Huh? How to develop the intellect so that nobody can take advantage of you? How do you develop the body? Exercise the intellect, which means think, question, inquire. Think of the pros and cons. Think independently, on your own, without depending on other people's opinions. That requires guts, that takes courage. And now, if I just say think, what will you think about? So, that is why we recommend the study of the Bhagavad Gita. Because the Bhagavad Gita has, apart from knowledge, it has an inbuilt program of intellectual development. Because it puts various concepts before you that are completely opposite of what you believe or what the worldly norms are. So it forces you to think, right? Like attachment. We believe that attachment is good. And that technology is pandering to attachment. So when the Gita says, asanga shastrena dridhena chitva, kill this attachment with the weapon of detachment. You say, my God, what is this? Weapon of detachment. So it forces you to think. Okay. We had completed verse 64, which spoke of the formula for self-control. Now, the moment we mention self-control, what do we think of? Restricted, restrained contact with the world. And we look down on people who eat well or drink more or whatever it is. We say they don't have self-control. But self-control has nothing to do with the quantum of enjoyment. And this is highlighted in a story of Krishna and Durvasa. So Durvasa was a great sage, but he had a reputation for voracious appetite and terrible anger also. So one time Durvasa came and banked on the opposite side of the river.
Just one very complete light bulb. He gets so much anger. Because the anger that he comes by desire. Just a light bulb. But I feel much.
See, these stories are not to be taken literally. Forget that. Krishna had 16,000 wives. How are you going to accept that? If you had even, forget 16,000, 16 wives, would you be able to manage? Correct. So don't think of that. These are all stories that have been given to highlight certain points. So you forget about that. Listen to this story. So Durvasa, the great sage, came and camped across the river from where Krishna was. And the tradition in our country is whenever a sage comes, you look after him, you give him food to eat, and take care of his needs. So word went to Krishna and he called his people and said, Durvasa has come there and you know his reputation for food, so cook lots of food, good food, and take it across to him. Now the ladies of his home were frustrated because they had to cook so much food for this man. So Krishna, then they were complaining. So Krishna decided to teach them a lesson. They were carrying these loads and loads of food on their head across the river. They went to the river wasn't spade, they couldn't cross. So they went back to Krishna and said, Krishna, we can't cross the river. He said, go to the river, and every river is revered as a goddess. He said, go pray to the goddess and say, if Durvasa is a Nitya Upavasi, show us the way. Nitya Upavasi means eternal faster. That means this is a guy who is fasting all the time. They started laughing. We're carrying loads of food and you're calling him Upavasi. But they had no choice. They went and they said that, and sure enough, the river parted and they had a clear passage across the river. They went. True to his reputation, Durvasa finished every morsel of food they had carried. Empty vessels they were bringing back. Again the river wasn't sped. So they went to Durvasa and said, Durvasa, please help us. We can't cross the river. We can't go home. He said, go to the river goddess and pray and say, if Krishna is a Nitya Brahmachari, show us the way. You know what Brahmachari is? Celibate. Eternal celibate. And Krishna had how many wives? 16,000. So now they really laughed. But they had no choice. They went. Again the river parted. So what is the message here? Upavasi does not mean a person who does not eat. Upavasi is one who has complete intellectual control over what he eats. What he eats, when he eats, how much he eats, everything. Same thing with celibacy. It's not physical abstinence. It is that two-step formula for self-control, which is, what is it? Let's see how many of you remember. Formula 64. Intellect, yes. This is called generalization. Simply say intellect. There are two ways of practicing self-control. What are these two? Are Piyush, you behave like you're a PhD in Vedanta, and now one simple question you're not able to answer.
Two ways. One is for the existing desire for objects, you use your intellect and see they don't fulfill, and it does not go back as more. And for new desire, you need to, you don't want that, you don't need that experience.
Close. But if you want to say it clearly, see, 100% clarity is the desire should not directly express as enjoyment. You should scan it through the intellect and only then go ahead. Second, a new enjoyment, the mind should not linger in that enjoyment after the experience is over. Right? So here again the intellect prevents your mind from going to a past enjoyment and lingering in that. That creates a fresh desire. So all you have to do is, desire can be fulfilled. You can enjoy the object of enjoyment. Only thing you should ensure is it doesn't boomerang back on you as more desire. So if you indulge indiscriminately in an object of desire, you create more desire. So that's why we say existing desire should not directly take you to enjoyment without the intervention of the intellect. Number two, the mind should not linger in a past enjoyment, which then creates a fresh desire. Okay? Now we move to 65. And then he says, if you do this, prasadam adhigacchati, you get peace of mind.
प्रसादे सर्वदुःखानां हानिरस्योपजायते प्रसन्नचेतसो ह्याशु बुद्धिः पर्यवतिष्ठते.
Prasade, in that prasad, in that peace, all sorrows end. The serene one's intellect is soon steady. So, the more control you exercise, the more peace you get. The more peace you get, the intellect becomes that much more strong. With that stronger intellect, you are able to control more, you gain more peace. Like this, like two pedals of a bicycle, you go towards realization. You get it? So what must you do? Start with using your existing intellect, however weak it may be. Use it. Control a little bit. You gain peace. In that peace, intellect becomes that much stronger. With a stronger intellect, you are able to control more peace, more intellect. Like that, you keep proceeding till you get to realization. Simple? Got it? Next verse, 66.
नास्ति बुद्धिरयुक्तस्य न चायुक्तस्य भावना न चाभावयतः शान्तिः अशान्तस्य कुतः सुखम्.
The ayukta, disunited, has neither intellect nor bhavana. Bhavana is translated as contemplation, but we'll explain what it is. And without bhavana, there can be no peace. How will there be happiness for the one without peace? So there are two broad categories of people. Ayukta, all of us. Disunited. There is no unity with Atman. We are united with all kinds of other things. And Yukta. Yukta Purusha is one who is in and through his activities in the world aligned with, united with thought of Atman. He never loses that. So he is giving the consequences of being Ayukta. Means, in other words, if you don't practice Formula 64, what happens to you? The Ayukta, disunited, has neither intellect nor bhavana. So bhavana is like concentration of thought, which is number one, contemplation, means you're thinking constantly about it. Then you organize your activities to get to that, to achieve that. Number three, there is this constant application of thought, application of effort towards that. And the last is devotion. You love what you're doing. You know, I saw an interview of Rahul Dravid. And the person who was interviewing asked him, what is the one thing that made you go for cricket? It made you go through all the challenges and all the setbacks that cricket had for you. He said, ever since I can remember, I just loved cricket. From when I was very young in school, that love for cricket took me. That is why he said, when parents bring little boys to learn from him, he says, the number one qualification is not fitness, it's not physical strength, it's not, none of that. It's whether the child loves cricket. Similarly with us, whatever it is that you're doing, you could be a chef, you could be a carpenter, you could be a musician, you could be a whatever it is, a businessman. That love must be there for what you're doing. Otherwise, you can't do it. It becomes drudgery. So you wake up in the morning excited. You have one more day to do what you love. See, when you, now I'm giving an example which you may be too old for that, but remember your youth. When you fall in love, you do so many things. You make sure you look good, you make sure you're wearing this proper clothes, your shoes, your, I don't know, so many things you look into. But that's not drudgery for you. Why? Because you're in love. If you were to do the same thing without this love, you wouldn't do it. Similarly, here in your vocation, in your career, whatever it is that you're doing, in fact, you must look at it not as a vocation, not as a profession, not as something you earn money from. Look at it as something you absolutely love. Like Nadal, every time he went onto court, he never walked onto court. Did you notice it? He ran, he jumped. He was always bubbly. And recently I saw an interview of him. He got very irritated because a journalist said that he was playing for money. He says, it's not about money. He got really angry. Because that's what it is. For someone at that level, it's about love. You love what you're doing. You know, Ustad Bismillah Khan used to refer to the Shehnai as his Begum. It's so cute. Begum means wife, you know. He referred to the Shehnai as his wife. So that much love he had for the instrument. Zakir Hussain said his father would be very particular about how they kept the tabla, where they kept it. They used to travel by train from place to place. And he would be look after it almost like a baby. That somebody should not come and kick it or throw it aside. That much respect and regard and love they had for the tabla or for the Shehnai. Do you have that for what you're doing? Because if you don't, you can't achieve excellence. And nobody, I mean, it has nothing to do with anybody else. It's just you and what you're doing. But that makes the difference. So that is bhavana. So when there's no intellect, the ayukta, there is no intellect, there is no bhavana, there is no peace. How can you have happiness then? Next verse, 67.
Is this not an attachment?
Yes, good question. But it is an attachment to the higher. You cannot get detached from anything unless you get attached to something higher. Otherwise, you will get stuck there. 67.
इन्द्रियाणां हि चरतां यन्मनोनुविधीयते तदस्य हरति प्रज्ञां वायुर्नावमिवाम्भसि.
Following the restive senses, the mind pulls one's discrimination away as the wind pulls away a boat in water. So, in this verse, he connects with verse 60. If you go back, let's go back. Verse 60 says, the powerful senses carry away the mind of even a constantly striving wise person. Remember that? And then 61 to 66, he goes off at a tangent, as it were, to highlight the importance of the intellect. Because what should follow is 67. He should say, that mind which has been dragged away by the intellect now takes, that mind which has been dragged by the senses now takes the intellect away. But he deliberately goes off to highlight the importance of the intellect because we don't know. We don't know the importance of the intellect. So in 61, he says, first restrain the senses, then sit in meditation. Tani sarvani sanyamya yukta asita matpara. 62, 63, he talks about the ladder of fall, the stairway to destruction. What it all begins, our destruction begins with what? Just a thought, one thought. Why not? Like many years ago, there was an industrialist in Coimbatore, I think, who suddenly said, wow, what am I doing starting a plant? He already had a factory, manufacturing goods, selling them, then earning money. Why not directly do it? So he started manufacturing counterfeit notes. And that was his undoing. So like that, it starts with just a thought. And if you don't bring your intellect in place, then that thought, one thought, becomes a thin stream of thoughts going from you to the object. That's called attachment. Attachment breeds desire, desire. So this is how you get to buddhi nashat pranashyati. It's a very sad fall. So then in 64, he gives the prescription for self-control. Formula 64. Two ways. Existing desire should not directly fuel your indulgence. That becomes malignant. And the second is that a new experience should not create a new desire, fresh desire in your system. Then 65, he says, in 64, he says, prasadam adhigacchati, you gain peace. In 65, he says, in that peace, the intellect becomes sharper. When the intellect becomes sharper, you gain more peace, and this is how you go steadily towards realization. 66, which we just done, says when there's no control, no peace, no happiness. Now he's connecting. That mind, which has been dragged by the senses earlier, now pulls the intellect away. And he gives a metaphor as the wind pulls away a boat in water. So this metaphor is from the Upanishads. The boat represents the individual, you and me. The ocean is the world. The wind, the passions of the mind. So when the wind is strong, the boat capsizes. When the passions of the mind are strong, what happens to the individual? Capsize. Captain of the boat is your intellect. However strong the wind, however stormy it may be, if the boat captain is alert and skilled, he takes you through the storm to the harbor of peace, and then you move on to the shore of immortality. So that's how you move from the shore of mortality to the shore of immortality. So the captain represents your intellect. Every captain consults the compass. The compass is your conscience, and it is the conscience that takes you from one level to another. The harbor of peace is where you meditate and move over to the shore of immortality. It's beautiful. It fits in so well. So it's the wind that makes the ocean. If the wind is strong, the ocean is stormy. If the wind is turbulent, the boat capsizes. When the mind is turbulent, the person perishes. So therefore, what is the message here? Control. And that now we move on to verse 68.
तस्माद्यस्य महाबाहो निगृहीतानि सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेभ्यः तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
What a beautiful conclusion. Tasmat, therefore, one is established in wisdom when one's senses are wholly withdrawn from sense objects, O Mahabahu, mighty armed one. So, see, you have to watch, observe how you're interacting with the world. What is happening with you? Are you losing control here? Are you able to control somewhere else? When you lose control, what happens? You know? So, it's never full control. The only time we control is when we are ill. Isn't it? You're not well, you've got diabetes, the doctor said don't eat. It's only there. But by ourselves, or people decide, oh, I want to lose weight, I want to be slim, I want to look good. And so they deny themselves. Now, such people who deny themselves food and drink and stuff like that, you find them highly frustrated. So they're getting angry, they're snapping, they're criticizing, they're bitter. Why? Because they haven't really controlled. See, true control is where you don't feel the urge. If you honestly have risen above junk food, you will not be tempted by a burger, however tempting it may be. They put it on big billboards and hoardings, and it looks very attractive. But if you have no desire for it, it does nothing to you. Fries. But deep down, if you have a desire, then you will say, oh, what is that? The other day I heard someone saying, there's a place in Sion called Guru something. What is it? Guru Krupa. Yeah, there. So somebody was going to Sion and his wife said, get me samosas from Guru Krupa. That means what? And the person who asked for samosas from Guru Krupa, I was shocked because she eats only salad and soup. Beyond that, she doesn't touch anything. And suddenly she's asking for samosas from Guru Krupa. I said, how do you know this place Guru Krupa? And how do you know that it serves samosas? They know. So that is the thing, you know, the self-control is not self-denial. It is an awareness, it is a moving to a higher level. And you can still eat samosas, that's not, you can go to Guru Krupa and eat. I mean, I don't know where it is or what it is, but that's the thing. It's not whether you have it or not, it's what value you place on it. It's how much you, whether there is this longing for it. So, therefore, one is established in wisdom when one's senses are wholly withdrawn. When will your senses be wholly withdrawn? When your whole personality has got a lift to the higher. It's like, you know, there's a story of the King of England. Once he was at war and he had to be in hiding. So he went to a lady's home and requested, but she didn't know who he was. She just knew some guy had come to and asked for shelter from the bitter winter, snow and cold. So she told him, she had put some bread in the oven and said, watch it. Now here is the king. He is planning how to regroup his forces and fight and all that. And this lady is telling him to take care of the oven and the bread. The bread got burnt to ashes because he was strategizing how to fight back. You know, that's the thing. So when your mind shifts to the higher, you're not focused on things like bread in the oven and stuff like that. So that's what he's talking about. And then he addresses Arjuna as, oh Mahabahu, means you're a mighty one. You've conquered the world, you've earned so much money, you've become a millionaire, you've got your empire and all that, and you can't control the senses. There is that little bit of sarcasm. Next verse, 69.
या निशा सर्वभूतानां तस्यां जागर्ति संयमी यस्यां जागृति भूतानि सा निशा पश्यतो मुनेः.
Here he puts it in a different way. He says the self-controlled one awakes in that which is night to all beings. That in which all beings are awake is night to the seer, Muni, sage. So he's putting it deliberately in a confusing manner for two reasons. One, see, we're already in verse 69. Arjuna has been listening since verse 61, since verse 1. We have only come just now. So there's a chance that you're, drowsy and not concentrating so much. And he's coming up with a very important verse next in 70. So he's giving this little thing that what is day is night, what is night is day. So suddenly you wake up and say, what's happening? And in 70, he makes sure that you're awake for that. But independently, it is true. He's talking about two kinds of people, outward looking people, extroverted people who are rushing out into the world for enjoyment. And the other is inward looking, introverted. So it is literally true. What the self-controlled one awakes, what time does a spiritual person wake up? Early morning, 4 a.m. That is the time when the extroverts are crawling back into bed after partying. And the spiritual person is introvert, goes to sleep early. That is when the extrovert is coming alive. But in various ways, they are opposite. Like an extroverted person is negative in his thinking, very pessimistic. An introverted person is positive and optimistic. An introvert is a giver, spiritual person is a giver. An extroverted person is a taker. We went to a place to give a talk recently, and the audience was all extremely affluent people. Okay, not middle class. All were rich. And after the talk, they go and as the books were displayed, they asked, "Ye free mein milega?" What a question to ask. Why would you want anything free? And then say, is it at a discount? Are you giving a discount? That's the thing. An extrovert is always agitated, disturbed, stressed out. An inward looking person is always at peace. You can't disturb him. So an extroverted person devolves and an introverted person evolves. So they're two different worlds. In the same world, one sees finitude, limitations, obstacles. The other one sees infinity. One sees a changing world and suffers. The other, in and through the changing, sees the changeless reality and revels in it. One sees the perishable world, another the imperishable Atman. One sees body, mind, intellect, the other sees Atman. So, it's a question of vision. There's a story of a large multinational company that one day decided in their board that they would take on the oldest employee of the company on the board. in New York. So they went around looking how many years have you served the company. It happened to be the oldest employee, happened to be in a factory in India. And that guy was about to retire. Shop floor he was working, an ordinary employee. So the managing director from the CEO from New York came here to this plant somewhere, and they got that employee there, and he shook hands with him and says, "Congratulations, my friend, you are now on the board of our company." So he's saying, what does that mean? You will get stock options, you will get a percentage on a commission on sales, you will get this, that, and the other, but there is no figure there. The only figure you can remember is some 1%, 1.5%. So he starts crying. And they say, "What's wrong with you?" He's saying, "Sir, I've served the company for so many years and I'm just about to retire. Please don't do this to me." Please don't do what? Take him on the board, which means so much more. But he can't visualize, he doesn't understand what that is. So then they ask him, "But what do you want?" He says, "Sir, please continue my salary. I'll retire after 3 years. For the next 3 years, please continue giving my salary." What was his salary? In those days, 3,000 rupees a month. So now the board it has to be taken to the board. The board takes a decision, extraordinary step they take, that in addition to all the perks and everything else he gets as a board member, he will also get 3,000 rupees. This is it. You talk to a child who's playing with marbles. He's the son of a billionaire, and you say, when you grow up, you'll get this, 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 this. So he looks at the marble and, will I be able to take this also? We are like that. Tukaram's wife, Sant Tukaram's wife, when Tukaram was about to take Mahasamadhi, he goes to his wife and says, "I'm going to Vithala now. Will you come with me?" You know what she said? She's not even bothered about the children. She says, "Who will take care of the cow?" What cow you're looking at? When you're about to go into infinity. So this is the problem with all of us. Now you're laughing because you looked at the cow. If I were to ask you, you would talk about something more absurd than that. That's the problem. But we don't understand. And how can you make a person understand what he's worth? Because the human intellect can only go so far. We're all like chicken. You can only fly 6 feet, 8 feet. You can't soar like that eagle. I don't know how many of you saw clips of the Republic Day parade. There's one aircraft, 500 kilometers an hour now, commercial aircraft also go. But this fighter plane was going at 900 kilometers an hour. One little thing. Amazing. Then the Concorde. And then how spacecraft take off. You see, that is it. When a spacecraft takes off, all the energy goes in just lifting off and going past the gravitational pull. Once it goes past gravity, theoretically it can keep going on for eternity. Yeah? That is what you and I are capable of. We are capable of just taking off and going past the gravitational pull of selfishness, ego, thought of self, my idea. What is that one little idea of yours that you are hanging on to? It's like saying my pencil. And yet, when you're looking at the big picture, have you seen the chairman of a company in his office? Have you seen? You should go and see. He will have about 5 pencils, sharpened like nobody's business, absolutely sharp. That means someone is sharpening he's not doing it himself. Someone is sharpening his pencils and keeping them in perfect order. And he writes with that. He has all the laptops and iPad and this, that and the other, but he writes with a pencil. And the moment that pencil gets a little blunt, discards it, takes another pencil. Everything is set so that he is not inconvenienced. But his thoughts are on, okay, there's a $1 billion deal here, there's a multi-billion dollar deal here. You know, that's the thing. So similarly us, once you have that vision of the beyond, you're not thinking of all this, but all this gets set automatically. Nature looks after you. All your pencils will be nicely sharpened and kept there for you. By whom? Narayana Swayam. Narayanam Swayam will come and serve you. You don't believe me? Try it. I'm not joking, honestly. Someone who's about to merge with God, God Himself comes and serves you. I mean, long before that. So you just have to get your act together. You've got to get your vision together. You've got to move away from pettiness. And when things come in the way of your pettiness, you must say, chhod do. Let go, because it doesn't matter. On this happy note, we'll end with a prayer.
पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।